Often when we're working on productions with vocals, one of the things that we want to do is to slightly improve the tuning of those vocals, either to just take little moments in performances that maybe are a little bit sharp and flat and sort of pull them into tune, or to much more radically rework them. And what we're going to do in this chapter is to look at a couple of ways in which technology can help us tune things. Now, there's no getting past the fact that Antares' Autotune has sort of taken its place in music production history as one of the most extraordinary sort of tools for allowing for this kind of manipulation to take place. Obviously sort of made famous by Cher's seminal Believe record from over 20 years ago now, but whether you're looking for the sort of instant retuning of the extreme version of Autotune, or a much more sort of gentle musical approach to just taking notes that are a little bit sharp or flat and pulling them into tune, it's a remarkable resource. And we're going to look at Melodyne in this video as well. But let's have a look firstly at kind of instant tuning effects, sort of auto-tune style. What I'm going to do is to take a vocal and I'm going to apply UAD's Autotune real-time access plugin, which is a very simple control that allows me to choose the key of the project that I'm working on. This one's in E minor, so I'm selecting that scale. And then what I've got is a retune speed dial, whether I want sort of slow retune, do I want the plugin to automatically detect pitch and tune it quickly at medium speed or more slowly. And then I've also got a humanized dial here over on the left-hand side. When I select a scale, I can see the notes of that scale are shown down at the bottom. And if I wanted to actually edit this scale by introducing more notes, I can simply just click them on and off the notes that I want to use. So let's hear what this sounds like with fast retuning.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
So if that's obviously quite a familiar sound, but if what I want to do is to sort of smooth the edges of this, take it out of the kind of robot style retuning, then obviously one thing I can do is to slow down how quickly Autotune snaps a note to a specific pitch. So here's the same idea. I'm going to toggle between medium and slow retune this time.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
So we've actually heard all three of those positions, and we can hear that whereas fast gives us that really sort of classic sound, both medium and slow take a similar idea. They're still producing absolutely perfect tuning, but they're just not pushing a note quite so quickly. And in combination with the humanized dial, what I have a chance to do is to slightly smooth out the way that the behavior of that snapping of pitch operates. So that's one way I can work. Now, plugins like this are also really useful for something else, which is that if I wanted to kind of reimagine this vocal completely, sort of get away from its melodic shape and produce something completely radical, one thing I could do would be to take it back up to sort of fast mode over here, and I could take off the vast majority of the notes that are playing. In fact, let's turn them all off apart from E.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
So what's happening there is that obviously occasionally the pitch jumps an octave, but because every single note has to retune to an E, then what we get is this really kind of divorced from the original melody kind of an idea. And actually having a pedal note like this run underneath the lead vocal might be an interesting way of sort of bringing a slightly otherworldly quality to a vocal. And of course, you could just decide if one note felt like too much, we could sort of begin to introduce an E minor chord by maybe just putting in one other note from that chord, the G.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
And obviously the more notes we get and the more target pitches there are for the original vocal to retune to, the more we begin to hear more of the original melody sort of coming back in. So this kind of one-stop shop for sort of automatic pitch retuning is one way that we can go when pitching. But if what we want instead is something more natural, then what we can do is to use one of the sort of other approaches to retuning, and I'm going to swap this out, and instead I'm going to fire up Melodyne, which also offers that kind of approach to automatically retuning a vocal, but will give us a shape to work to of the original melody, where we can take individual notes, chop them up, find the little bits that are out of tune, and address them individually. Now, I'm working with the ARA version of Melodyne, so when I press play, what's going to happen is it's automatically going to scan the original vocal in, and we'll be able to then work with it. So I'm just going to have that happen by pressing play.
Love ain't simple when you.
And what we can see straight away, I don't even need to wait for the phrase to play through, is that it's now scanned the outline of this melody. And I'm obviously in a position to sort of scroll in around particular parts of this melody and be able to sort of see this in depth, literally just focusing in on an individual phrase at a time. Now, the way that Melodyne does this is it's detected the original pitch of each note. I can see the first note's a G, and I can see that the shape of these first few notes is just dropping down towards this point. But what it's also doing is it's detecting whether or not it sees a note as an individual pitch in its own right, or whether or not it detects variation within that pitch. So for example, if I look at this note here, I can see that the sort of orange blob has been detected as a D, and in fact this pitch is right in the middle of that D, but I can see the vibrato, the natural vibrato of the singer, which is basically bending this note sharp and flat. And what Melodyne allows me to do is not only to modulate or change the pitch of a detected note, but also to change that vibrato if I want to. If I want to make it more extreme, I can, and similarly, if I want to rein it in, I can do that too. So what I can do is to come up here to the various tools up at the top, and firstly what we've got is this repitching tool. When I click here, what I can do is to click on a note and repitch it. And when I click on a note, Melodyne will play me just that fraction of this vocal. And you can hear that what it's doing is it's actually playing it all the way through, so we hear that pitch sweep up into this note in the first place. Now, the temptation always is just to say, okay, well, I can see straight away that this note is kind of supposed to be a G. It's nearly a G, but it's hovering around the top of the F sharp pitch as well. I can see the pitches over here at the top, and what I automatically want is to bring that in tune by simply pushing it up into G territory. And that's fine. We can easily go through and repitch like that, pulling notes down to the target pitches. But what that doesn't do is to imagine that maybe it might be kind of more yearning for this first note to be a little bit flat, that maybe from a performance point of view, having a note that isn't absolutely bang in tune is in some way more emotive than simply just squashing its pitch and getting everything absolutely bang in tune. So that's really worth thinking about. Constantly loop through sections of your track and pull pitches around, but make sure that you're not just automatically kind of quantizing pitch for the sake of it. Now, what do I do when I get to a point like here where actually Melodyne has detected this note as a single pitch when actually I don't think in the melody it is?
Love ain't simple with you anymore.
Okay, so we can hear that that note steps. So what I need to do here is to use a different tool. This one here, this note separation tool, which allows me simply just double click on the waveform to separate these two notes. And in fact, I can do that in a couple of spots if I want to. And having done that, I'm then in a position to actually repitch this. So this first note is supposed to be a D. This note drops to a B. And then it comes back up to a D. And both those sections of that note are supposed to be a D. So I'm going to just re-pitch those. Now I can see that by pulling this down to a B, again, I can see the pitch envelope actually within that note. And I can see that the very beginning of it is just going to be a little bit flatter, a bit lower in pitch than the main body of the note. Probably won't matter, but nevertheless, if I need to, I could just readjust that slightly upwards to make sure that that note doesn't feel too flat.
Love ain't simple with you anymore.
Okay, now let's go back to that issue of vibrato. If I suddenly decide that actually the wobble, the natural sort of vibrato of an individual note is too wide, how would I go about addressing that? Well, I can come back to this first set of tools and click here. And what I'm going to do here is to choose the pitch modulation tool, which is the second one in this list. And what this then allows me to do is to click on a note and rein in or expand the vibrato on a note. So if I want less vibrato here, I can click on it and simply drag down. And I could do the same thing here. And what's happening now is that I'm just pulling in the vibrato on each note.
Love ain't simple with you anymore.
So suddenly now what we've got is a phrase where the vibrato is being controlled, and from a pitch point of view, we have got pitches under control too. Now, it's absolutely possible to use Melodyne to produce the kinds of effects that we heard with Autotune. I could snap every single note, absolutely bang in tune, in this first phrase, and what I could then do would be to select all of these notes by sort of drawing a box around them. I've selected the pitch modulation tool, and I'm selecting all of these notes, and I can literally until they have absolutely no modulation at all.
Love ain't simple with you anymore.
And what we get now is something which is much closer to that kind of auto-tune style tuning if we want to. So we've only looked at a few notes, but of course I could go through my entire phrase and think about the individual pitching, the vibrato amount on every single note, and we now know that I can chop notes up. If Melodyne detects one note when actually we're hearing two separate pitches, we know we can separate those, and we're then in a position to drag pitches down to where we want them to go.